Welcome to Colors Are a Crutch. We are Max and Max, and today we're going to talk about the update, the Spring 2023 update to the CEDH Decklist Database. We're going to talk through a few of the new decks, some decks that were removed, some decks that we feel might have been a little slighted in the process, as well as discussing the database itself, its view within the CEDH community, how it is supposed to help players, and how it actually helps players.
Yep. Before we get into that, though, I just want to call out the fact that our good friend Freedom Waffle just put out a pretty great deck tech video on your Kinnan list. And we're going to put a link to that in the comments below. I highly recommend everyone go check that out. Okay, so yeah, before we get into the updates and what's in the CDH database, I just want to call out the fact that we know that the people behind the database are doing this as an act of love. We know they put a lot of work into this. It's volunteer time. They're really doing it because they want to benefit the community. And any criticism that we lay on them is, we understand where their perspective is and where they're coming from, and they're just trying to help. So, we're not shitting on them for the sake of shitting on them, but we are going to level some honest criticism against them and what we think isn't what it could be in the database, and hopefully that feedback leads to improvement at some point. And I also want to make clear that this isn't just about Florian. That's kind of my favorite deck. It's what I spend all the time brewing. It has been rejected multiple times by the database. Sure, I'm a little bit bitter, but I'm not. This is not about Florian. This is about the database as a whole. I don't know if you want to comment on that at all, or what your thoughts are in terms of that, Max.
I think that's a pretty good, pretty good start to it.
Yeah. So with that, why don't we just jump right into the spring 2023 update? Just to clarify for everyone how the Decklist database works. They have a bunch of reviewers who are people from the community who every 3 months or 4 months go through all of the lists that are submitted through their website. They score the list based on what they see subjectively, what staples are missing, if there's any missing, and they take the time to score those lists, and then they get passed on to the deck list database managers, and the managers are the ones that make the final decision as to whether or not a deck makes it into the database. To be clear, there are 4 managers total. Those guys are Sick Robot, Sinestra, Natix, and Squirrel Mob. And Sick Robot and Sinestra have both taken a step back, so it's really just down to Natix and Squirrel Mob. So, to be clear, that means that the final arbiters of truth for the entire database are just 2 guys, basically. Good guys that mean well, but 2 guys.
It's an opinionated list.
Yes, and there's some misnomers here too. It's called a decklist database. It's not a database. It's a list of decks. Just to be clear, a database is an entity where you put a bunch of data in, and you can run queries against it. You can tag that data. This is not that. This is just a list of curated decks.
And we'll kind of show that there is a bit of a differentiation between the goal that they say they have in mind and the goal that's kind of listed on the database, and what both of those are supposed to entail and how it is actually represented. Talking about the database, the way they list it, they say, welcome to the CEDH Decklist Database. The database is a showcase of different decks from CEDH. The goal of the database is to highlight the variety of different decks that exist within the space to help new players acclimate to CEDH concepts and possibilities, while also helping established players find inspiration for brewing and playing. Then, in italics, the DBB is not a tier list, nor a collection of tournament decks, and should not be considered in any way a list of the best decks in CEDH, nor an exhaustive list of decks in CEDH. It is a collection of decks that the DDB managers and reviewers believe underscore just some of the variety of options available to players within the world of CEDH. This sounds great, hypothetically, if it's actually what it is. And I would say what's listed here is a little closer to what it is. The problem is the misconceptions that come from labeling things like competitive decks on the main page. You're saying it's not a tier list, but you're labeling the main page to be competitive decks.
Yes. So looks like there were 294 submissions in that 3-month period. And here are the lists that made it through. So they have several different categories. They have the Brewer's Corner, they have Outdated, and then they have what they call Competitive. It says main page here, but if you go to the main page, you can see pretty clearly that they label those as competitive decks. So presumably, just by name alone, that would mean that the other pages are not competitive decks, which is incorrect.
Or not yet recognized as the top tier of competition. And it is also to be shown that it says right above the list, the main page showcases a selection of decks the database team has chosen as a snapshot of the wider CEDH environment, which could be worded as snapshot of the meta.
100% agreed. Yep, exactly. So with that, here are the lists that made it into the Brewers Corner. And I find this pretty interesting. We have 3 Atraxa lists. So I don't know if everyone's aware, they should be. Atraxa has been consistently topping tournaments for 6 months now, at least.
Yeah. I mean, you have a few guys that are really the bulk of the top 16s when you're looking at Punny and people like that. But overall, Atraxa has proven itself to be a consistent performer, a top-tier strategy that can be taken a few different ways to provide it with a little bit of flexibility for the pilots. It's not always just a pile of good cards. It is a coherent strategy that can consistently be a force to be reckoned with in all of the major tournaments and is a very competitive deck, which is how the main page is labeled.
Right. So from my perspective, putting it in Brewer's Corner is you're basically 3 months in the past at this point. And that's kind of another problem with the database is it takes so long to update that you end up missing out on what the current meta is, even though the stated purpose of the database is to show the current meta. The other decks that go into the Brewer's Corner is this Poly Broodlord Rogsai list. That's kind of interesting. That seems like okay. That seems like a...
Yes.
Okay, yeah, Brewer's Corner, maybe weird, it's interesting, yeah. Something interesting. Thalia the Gitrog Monster, I mean, Thalia has put up some results. It's not, I wouldn't call it a top deck, but it's certainly a competitive deck, so sure, it makes sense to be in the database or the list of decks. Under Brewer's Corner, sure, I guess. Yeah, I don't know that that's where it belongs. I would probably put it on the main page already.
I mean, I would put Thalia and the Gitrog over many decks on the main page if we're considering competitiveness.
Then we have, where it gets really interesting to me, is upgraded to the main page. We have Dargo Cedar, Greater Good Storm. And I know this is Connor's deck, and Connor's an amazing player, an amazing brewer. But even when I talked to him, he was kind of like, huh? Hey, it's an interesting deck. I like it. I think that's a deck that to me belongs in the Brewer's Corner. It's something being developed, and it's an interesting approach to the format, and I think it's certainly belongs in our eyes view. But upgraded to the main page while Atraxa's on the Brewer's Corner, it seems kind of backwards to me. But okay, and then we have the new main page additions. I'll skip over TNT because it's yet another TNT deck.
Yeah, so many of them.
How many are there at this point?
God.
I'm gonna look real quick because I'm curious.
Yeah, I would imagine it's like 4 or 5. Okay, so there you have Thrasios, Tymna Hog, Thrasios, Tymna Midrange, Thrasios, Tymna Hermit Druid, and there's 3 Hermit Druid ones, 3 mid-range ones, and another Hog one. So 7 on the main page.
Yeah.
And now an additional one added to the Brewer's Corner.
Yeah, so just in case we don't have enough Thrasios and Tymna, because now we have 7, which is interesting to me because, in my opinion, Thrasios and Tymna is a deck that's kind of fallen off. I mean, it's still present in the meta, certainly, but I would not call it, the most common deck. And it's kind of presented on the main page like it's one of the most seen decks in the meta. And it's just not at this point.
I will respectfully disagree with you on TNT. I think that the meta has been going in this line where we were leaning a little turbo before, and people were really into this blue farm deck of Tymna Kraum. And Tymna Kraum, over the last 6 months, has started to move more towards a mid-range deck, more towards a deck that's trying to do the turbo win-gons, but attempting to grind. And people are falling back to that previous interpretation of, wait, if we're trying to grind, the king of the grind is Thrasios. So people are moving a little more towards Tymna Thrasios instead of Tymna Kraum. And in the last couple months, I have been brewing with people multiple Tymna Thrasios strategies, variants from Hulk to Hermit Druid, etc.
Oh yeah, I don't disagree with that, and I'm not saying that Thrasios Tymna is no longer, relevant. I'm just saying that if it's the deck list, or if it's the commander combination with the most decks on the database, I don't think that's correct. I think it definitely belongs a place of prominence. I just don't think it's the most common deck in the format anymore, which it was at one point.
Well, I think I don't know. I don't necessarily means it means it's the most common deck in the format. I think it means that it has maybe the most variance in how it can be built, and there is a chance that it could be that because you don't see Blue Farm having 8 different lines to win the game. They really are all ad nauseum Underworld Breach decks in their heart versus TNT, where you do have the different option of being a mid-range Thrasios deck, being a Turbo Hermit Druid deck, or being a Hulk variant.
That's fair. Totally fair. Totally fair. All right, so to keep going, so then we have the new main page additions. We have Inala, we have Jessica Ishai, we have Kenrith. These all make sense. Kenrith the King's Kitten, that deck has put up results recently, a couple of different tournaments. That's a great deck. We've got
What's new about it compared to the other Kenriths?
So it's all based around Displacer Kitten and Teferi as being one of the primary lines in the deck, which is kind of new. And this one pilot who submitted this deck has done very well. I think he top 4'd and top 16 in the last like 3-4 months, so he's doing quite well. We have Kinnan. Is this your Kinnan list?
No, so this one is Pingmeister's Kinnan list. I submitted my deck list for the database, and I did question why it was not accepted. Apparently, I missed the last deadline, so it will be up for consideration for the October update. So fingers crossed to see it on the main page then. This one is Pingmeister's, an amazing Kinnan deck list that I 100% should agree should be on the database. It is a new take on Kinnan. It is different from mine as well, and it's an incredible list that he pilots so well.
Yeah, makes sense. And then we have Old Stick Fingers. So how many Old Stick Fingers lists does that make?
Yeah.
Is that 3 or 4 Old Stick Fingers lists?
I think we're at 4 now on the main page, maybe 3. It's right up there. Yep.
Yep. 4. 4.
And another one in the outdated deck section. So 5 Old Stick Fingers decks. Would you mind just doing me a favor? Could you go to EDH Top 16 and have that ready to be pulled up as well?
Yeah, I'll do that right now. Okay.
Because I would love to check how many Top 16s Old Stick Fingers has.
Yeah, let's look right now. Let's do that. Let's see. Old Stick Fingers. There. It's searchable. We do have
0. 0 top 16s.
No, we have. Oh yeah, 0 top 16s. We have 2 submissions in tournaments over 64. 3 wins combined between the 2 entries. Same guy. And yeah. So I don't think. So does Stick Fingers warrant 5 lists in the database? I'll leave that to the listeners to answer for themselves. And then we have 2 more Thrasios Tymna decks, which we already talked about. And then we removed some interesting decks from the Brewer's Corner. The one that's interesting to me is I kind of cut it off here, but I'll fix that in post, whatever. We have Slicer, which I think, I don't know about you, but I think that deck belongs in the competitive meta, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's once again, is Slicer a tournament deck that's going to be consistently top 16ing? Absolutely not. But if you are making the CDH database a representation of the meta, or worded as they put it on the front page, a representation of the CDH environment, which is trying to give newer players interpretation of what they might run into at their LGS, you're going to run into a Slicer deck. It's a very commonly played deck that a lot of people love.
Yeah, and I actually think the same thing is true for Jensen. I've seen Jensen a number of times. I've seen it. Yeah, Jensen Luris, right? Exactly. It's the companion-based CDH deck, and I've lost to that deck a number of times. That deck is good. And
it is one of the best ad nauseum decks in existence. It is the cleanest Naz you're ever going to see. They have 2 ad nauseums because they also get Bring to Light.
Currently not represented in the database, CDH Decklist Database, that's supposed to be representative of the meta in the wild today. And Jensen and Slicer not being in the deck list doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah, those are both decks that I have played against many times from multiple different pilots. So it's not just one guy I run into commonly. Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to what's also missing from this list, which is my Florian deck. Now, it's interesting to me because I've submitted the Florian deck now. I think this is my 6th time submitting the deck to the Decklist database, and the 6th time it's been rejected. And this isn't about Florian. This isn't about me being upset about it not being included. But I do have to ask the question: like, if I look at this list here and I see that there are 5 Old Stick Fingers lists on the database, what is it about Florian that makes it not acceptable and not something that's representative of the meta of CDH. And to that end, I took to the Discord over on the Decklist Database Discord to kind of ask that question and kind of raise some of the questions that we've already started asking here. And I was basically kind of shut down in the sense that they said, why would you play, Florian over playing Rogsai or a 4-color pile like Timnacron? And my answer to that is, well, what is the purpose of the database? If the purpose of the database is to show the top decks in the format and really boil it down to only the best decks in the format, from that perspective, okay, look, I could understand you're saying that only Rogsai and Timnacron and a few other decks really qualify as that level, but if the purpose of the database is to display the current meta that you'd run into in the wild, at your LGS, at tournaments, online, what have you, I don't understand. I don't understand the rejection. I just don't.
No matter what category you list there, which again, your conversation with Nadex, he openly admitted that Florian is a deck he has run into in the wild. So the only category where you don't put in Florian is not one that's listed on the database as their reasoning. It's only from your personal conversations on the, not personal, listed conversations on the public forum on the CEDH Decklist Database with Nadex, where he tries to say that it's not different enough. It's not a unique deck in what it's trying to do, but it also is. They have multiple Rascos. They have lots of different ad nauseum decks. They don't all require blue to function, but like in our personal conversations and what you said before, Timnacron is a deck trying to get to its combos by gaining card advantage through Timna, where you have to hit 3 different opponents, and you are often using spells to remove an opponent's creature just so you can get an additional card with your Timna attack. Florian is unique in that it lets you just focus on a singular player to get the damage, and then gives you a wider spread of card selection to choose the piece you actually need in that moment. Every single deck in CDH, not every single one, the majority of the decks in CDH are boiled down to a few select win cons, and what gives them variety is their different method of getting to that win con, and Florian is a very unique version.
Yep, 100%. So, to me, I don't understand, I will never understand why it was rejected if that was the perspective. But, let's take that. Okay, I'll take that feedback, and then where I really struggle is the inconsistency with what that feedback was to me and the other lists that are on the database currently. And to that end, why don't we go through some of those and just kind of think about it from the perspective of why Florian was rejected and why these other decks would make it, and whether or not these are decks that are representative of the meta, which is what this decklist database is supposed to be about. So if you start right at the top, we've got Oswald, Rule of Law. Have you seen that deck a lot? I've seen it a couple times.
It's a deck I have seen in the wild. It's a deck I don't envision coming up to in tournaments. And I think tournaments should maybe not be the baseline thing that is what we're talking about for if a deck should be on the database, because they do say it's supposed to be the wider CEDH environment, and that can be taken as a deck you might be running into in the wild. And Oswald is a deck I have run into in the wild. But I think when you're considering certain decks over other decks, especially on a main page listed as competitive decks, the fact that it's called competitive decks does mean tournament results should count for something.
Right, agreed. And right now, if you have the conversation with Natix and the other manager, Squirrel, Mob, he's gonna respond that tournaments are not considered at all. And in fact, they will point you to EDH Top 16, which is great, and say that it's a completely separate way of looking at the meta. And I completely disagree with that. I think tournaments are a part of the meta and are a part of the conversation. And to not consider tournament results at all when putting together a list of competitive decks is just, to me, it's criminal. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
If they just titled the section "Common Decks,"
yes,
or
but again,
change it to "Up and Coming Decks," but it's listed as competitive decks.
Right, but again,
what decides if a deck is competitive? If it is performing in a competitive environment.
Right. But again, this is the deck list database, that database term is a misnomer, because a database, you could tag each list like, hey, this is a tournament thumbs up list. This is Natix's personal favorite list, thumbs up. This is a mono white deck. This is, several different attributes. And then as a user, I could query the database and say, hey, show me all the lists that Natix likes. If that's what I'm looking for. Or I could show all the decks that are putting up results if I want. You can query a database. You cannot query this list. It is 100% curated by a couple of people, and that's problematic. So I won't go through every single list on here. Are there any that you want to call out specifically?
If are we comparing right now which decks should not be there over Florian?
Yeah, or which decks are not representative of the meta, which decks don't produce a unique approach that.
Well, so yeah, if you look at a really interesting one there is like Orvar Twitch Control. Orvar Twitch Control, unique. Absolutely gets the unique tag, but is a deck I have run into 0 times ever. I've never played against it
once. I've seen it once in the last 2 years.
And there's 3 lists for it, so it's like,
yeah,
I don't know. That's strange to me. It gets unique, and if you want it to be unique, that's fine. But it is not competitive. It is a deck that I think is the definition of a Brewer's Corner type deck. It's a deck that is just a cool thing that some people are doing, but isn't competitive. And that's where I think they really need to change the categories for competitive and Brewers. Where yes, the competitive decks are the consistent decks that put up results, and you will commonly see in the meta. And the Brewer's Corner is more these unique style decks like Orvar Twitch Control. And I think the Brewer's Corner shouldn't be this, thing that you have a limited time base on and then you get removed. I think that is a great section for a database to be like, here's all the really unique, cool things you can do in CDH that might not be initially considered the most competitive.
Yeah, 100% agreed. 100% agreed. And to pause and talk about the meta again, like what does the meta mean? Like, what does the meta mean? To me, all right, we've got tournaments, we've got LGS play, we've got spell table play, we've got, what do you call them? The command fests that go on throughout the country. You've got leagues that go on online and in person. All of those constitute the meta. So decks that, according to the database are representative of that meta need to occupy a significant portion of somewhere in those categories. And I don't see Orvar in any of those. That may change by putting it in the Brewer's Corner. Like people get to see it, people get exposed to it and think about it, and then people start picking it up and playing it, and then all of a sudden it does become part of the meta. But today I would not call it part of the meta.
Because there's an enormous population of CDH players that outwardly say they do not want to play the decks that everyone else is playing. They don't want to play a Thrasios deck trying to win with infinite mana. They don't want to play Najeela. They don't want to play Blue Farm. A lot of people don't like playing decks that just they feel everyone else is playing. And there should be a section of the database dedicated to that type of person who's like, I want something unique. And Orvar would fit that mold perfectly.
Yeah, agreed. Moving through some of the other ones here, Crick obviously makes sense. Magda makes sense. Those are both decks that we've seen in the wild. We've seen them at different events. I haven't seen Crick put up a lot of tournament results, but I still see it entered into tournaments, and my God, it turned once like nothing else.
Yeah, it's a competitive deck that deserves to be on the main page, even though it's not putting up consistent top 16s or anything. Right. Magda, obviously a very real deck, recently top 4, and I know a bunch of local tournaments my buddies went to in the last week, and I think all of them had Magda being very competitive there. Bergie Storm is a deck I've seen one time. It's a glass cannon deck that takes a 30-minute turn and then sometimes wins.
yeah. Well, we've got 2 Bergie lists. So just for me to cry again for a second. So we have 2 Bergie Storm decks. We have 3 Orvar decks. We have 0 Florian decks, right?
Yeah.
Just okay. Moving on. We got Godo. Obviously, I love Godo. I think Godo is a eternal deck that will always have a place in this format. We have Yisan. Okay, sure. I haven't seen that deck a whole lot, but it's definitely out there. Selvala, Brostorm, that's definitely out there. I don't know if you've seen it a lot, but it's there.
Not common, but it's there and it deserves to be on the page.
We've got Shurikai. Shurikai is a real deck.
Yep.
Interestingly, there's only 2 Shurikai decks on the database.
And I don't think either is the best one.
But 5 old Stick Fingers decks. So 2 Shurikai, 5 old Stick Fingers decks. Again, just to me, not representative of the meta. I see a lot more Shurikai than I see any of the other decks we've mentioned so far. And then moving from there to Vohar, have you ever seen Vohar?
Yes, Vohar is a real deck. It is Dimir Wincon deck. It is an incredible Doomsday deck. It's an incredible Scepter deck. It's an incredible, pretty much literally every single Dimir Wincon. It runs them all super well. It does, drawing cards. It makes your opponents lose direct life. It lets you recast spells from the graveyard. I actually think it's a very underplayed commander in my opinion.
I agree. I think it's a good deck. I think it's a great deck, but I'm not seeing it in the wild. I haven't seen
I've seen it from a few people. Though some of them switched over to Rona, and then I think they've kind of noticed that Vohar is just better than Rona.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think it's a great deck. But again, there's 3 copies of it in the database. I'm not seeing it in the wild nearly as much as I'm seeing, say, Shirokai, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Yuriko, obviously, Yurikai's a thing.
Does its thing.
Malcolm,
never actually seen Malcolm Tevish.
Never seen Malcolm Tevish, ever. I mean, there's only one list, okay, but that's another list that to me belongs in the Brewer's Corner. It's an interesting combination. There's probably some interesting stuff it's doing here. It looks like it's using Doomsday. Cool. That's a cool deck. I want to hear more about it, but I don't think it belongs on, on the main page. It's one of those decks that makes sense in the Brewer's Corner, right?
Toxrol is one, as I have. Toxrol is the next one, and I have kind of questions there. You've been playing CDH a lot longer than I have. I'm relatively new to the CDH community, getting into it, less than 6 months ago. Toxrol, when it came out, was it a more real deck, or has it always been this kind of meme you'll occasionally see?
Yeah, so there was a point in time where Toxrol was really good, and it was kind of like you talked about the Isa Rev, Thassa's Oracle approach. I mean, this deck does the thing with that. It was Dimir.deck before Vohar was available. I actually built it and played it for a little while. Quite good. Has fallen off significantly. I've seen it a couple times in tournaments or at my LGS, and I've not been impressed. But that's not to say it won't come back at some point. But again, looking at this deck and then comparing it to, hey, Florian, I don't understand why Toxrol deserves a spot, but Florian doesn't. But I'm biased. What can I tell you? And then we get into my favorite category. We have the Rakdos decks. And I believe yeah, go ahead.
Before we delve into the Florian part of it, I guess it might have been too late for this deadline, and I know that I forgot to submit my list. I will be submitting it for the next one, but why is there no Ob Nixilis Captive Kingpin on the main page? A deck that came out and in its first tournament where it was even a legal commander got 2 top 16s and continues to put up performances?
Because we're 4 months in the past. That's what the database is. And the way that the database updates every 3 or 4 months, it's just too slow to really keep up with what's going on. So if the stated purpose of the database is to be a snapshot of the meta as it exists today, it is failing miserably in that category by not having Ob Nixilis on here. Clearly a deck that people are playing and going to continue to play, and should absolutely be represented. And my feeling is, and this is maybe this is too much to ask for 2 guys who are doing all this work, but you don't need to wait for someone to submit a deck to include it. If everyone knows that Ob Nixilis is a thing, there's countless tweets about it. People are brewing it from every angle possible. There's playing with power videos with it out. Like, everyone knows that Ob Nixilis is a thing. Why wouldn't you reach out and find a list to include in your update, knowing that it's representative of the meta?
I mean, they just need to have rolling submissions, which we can get to more later. But if there's an obvious deck that should be included on the main phase, like Atrax or Ob Nixilis, just add it in. Like, you shouldn't even have to have it be submitted. If you see Punny put up 4 straight top 16s with Atraxa, where he's like the #1 seed in every single tournament, just reach out and say, are you cool if we put your list on the database? And they'll say yes.
Yeah.
Your job could be a lot easier. And then there can be a submission section as well for decks that you might not be considering that are obvious, where people can submit their own. But if there's an obvious deck that deserves to be on here, just put it on here.
Right. 100% agreed. And then we move on to what's actually in the database in terms of Rakdos decks. And the first one we see is Prosper Turbo. So this is another situation where, like, I'm not shitting on Prosper. Prosper is a great deck. It's very interesting. It's a different angle of play. It's fun. It doesn't put up results. It's just, it isn't, hasn't done anything in terms of tournaments. I haven't seen it do anything at LGSs. It hasn't put up top results online that I've seen. So it's an interesting deck, but why would it be here and Ob Nixilis and Florian not be here? Doesn't make sense
So
to
I
me.
I can say that my buddy played at I think about 50-man tournament in Michigan this last weekend, and Prosper was the winner.
Oh, nice. That's good. All right. So if I look at Prosper on EDH Top 16, I see
Zero.
multiple. No, I see multiple entries. One,
Yeah,
two,
but
three,
zero top
four,
16s.
five entries, and I see across those five entries, four total wins
It's not great.
across all of those entries. That just isn't. That
It's
isn't.
not
If
great.
I'm analyzing what deck I want to bring to a tournament or to an event or to, my LGS to perform well in CDH, this doesn't show that. So I have a hard time. I would have a hard time choosing Prosper as my choice.
And
Now,
to all the people who say that Prosper is better than Obnixilis, Prosper has never top 16, and Obnixilis immediately got multiple.
yes, yeah, and Florian has top 16 four times now in CDH.
Yeah.
So and not just me, right? Another pilot top 16 did as well. So I would argue that Prosper and Florian are not equal. Um,
Yeah, they're not.
yeah,
I will say Prosper, well, actually, no, they're not more unique. Prosper is a more unique strategy in totality. Florian is just also a very unique method of getting to the win con.
yes, yes. So then we have the Turbo Nas section, which in my mind is where Florian would fit perfectly, but never
Yeah.
mind. We have Roger Tevish, which I think this is a fantastic deck. This is Eisenhertz put this together. I think this deck is competitive and absolutely belongs here on the main page, right? No arguments from me. And I think the other ones are also equally interesting. The Jessica Tevish list does some cool things, although I haven't seen that put up any results.
I've never seen it. I'm also shocked that Zero Game Actions is not on here.
Exactly. Probably in my mind, the best Roger Tevish list there is
It's
that
so
deck.
cool. It's one of my favorite decks. That is, and if you're looking for unique decks, which is what seems to be their main criteria is uniqueness. Dude, Roger Tevis Zero Game Actions is one of the greatest CDH decks ever developed. It is so unique. It does something that no other deck does. It's incredible. And you're doing an absolute all-out, no game action, Selesnya style stacks plan in a Rakdos shell. It's
It's
so cool.
fantastic.
It's so cool.
I was at Silicon Dynasty where Peter Zentik did his top four with that deck, and my God, it was just fantastic to watch. Like every round, watch him cast Obliterate and everyone lose their minds. I mean, that
Yeah.
deck is.
Did every game go to time?
If there's one deck that belongs in this database, like in Rakdos colors above all others, I would put that one above all the others because it's just how are you not sharing this with the world? Everyone needs to know about that deck.
I would put it below up next to this, but
Well,
right after that, and Prosper actually, or not Prosper, Florian. I would
yeah.
put Obnixilis and then Florian, and then I would put Roger Tevis Zero Game Actions.
Yeah. So along those lines, where would you rank Renzo?
Oh, undeserving to even exist on the Brewers Corner. I don't know. Like what is Grenzo? I've never. It has.
Well,
I think it had 0 entries as well. It doesn't even have an entry in EDH Top 16.
I don't
And
know that I've ever seen it. I've never seen
I've
it.
never seen it. I've never seen it. And there's 3 lists on the database. It makes no sense. It has one of the best names, Techno Dungeons. I really like that, but it does nothing and it's terrible and it shouldn't exist and I've never seen it anywhere. It's not a display of the meta in tournaments. It's not a display of the meta at LGSs. It is a display of absolutely nothing. And saying it's unique is fine, and it's a perfect Brewer Corners deck from a unique standpoint, but still, if no one's playing it, how is it a representation, as it says at the top, of the CEDH environment?
100% agreed. 1000% agreed. You couldn't be more right. I mean, get this out of here. You gotta be kidding me. And no disrespect to the people who brewed these decks. I'm sure you put a lot of work into it, but you're not even playing it anymore. Let's be honest. So
Actually, when was the last time it was updated? Click on a random list. When was the last time it was even updated?
this one was updated 20 days ago. Okay.
Not bad.
Doomsday at its finest 7 months ago.
7 months ago.
Okay, and then Techno Dungeons 4 months ago.
4 months. Yeah,
Guys, come on.
So
Seriously,
they don't even
come on.
have Hoarding Broodlord.
Get out of here. Yeah, just does not make any sense at all. Okay. Then we move on to, I mean, these are decks that obviously make sense. Minsk and Boo, Yasharin
Yeah.
stacks, Sisay, obviously.
I think Minskaboo is a Brewer's Corner deck more than a main page personally, but we don't need to delve too deeply into every deck or it'll take forever.
Yeah, I think that's one of those decks where people would argue with you, and I'm more on your side, but there's enough people who would disagree with us that okay, we don't need to fight about it. Then we
I'm
have
playing Atali Prime and Conquer over in Minskaboo.
Atali's not on here, by the way, right? No
Yeah,
Atali. What the hell, guys?
But Atali is absolutely brand new. I can understand that not being there yet, unless they do rolling submissions. Then I think there's an argument to put Atali on here.
It should be in the Brewers Corner, right?
Yeah,
If nothing else,
it should be.
Like every time, in my mind, every time an interesting deck emerges in the meta, put it in the Brewers Corner at that point immediately. Right. Don't wait.
You do have to give credit to the current system, which I don't agree with the current system, but the fact is the deadline was April 30th. So anything that came after April 30th has a 0% chance of showing itself right now. And right, Atali is, what, 2 months old?
Yeah, that's fair. But again, rolling updates. Let's get it going. All right, so keep going. Sisay, there's only one Sisay list. And to me, that's a crime because Sisay is...
I've never seen it.
Well, this is the Celestia Sisay. Oh my god. Let me pause for a second.
Yeah.
This is not five. This is yeah. I know the guy who runs this deck. He plays it extremely well. He puts up results. It belongs here. But so does Florian for exactly the same reason.
That's true. That is a deck that is probably a perfect comparison to Florian.
Yes.
It's a unique 2-color commander. I guess it's maybe a little more unique in exactly how it's playing the game, but it is another deck that is played by mostly one person, puts up results with just one person, and has its unique way of getting to the Selesnya win cons.
Yep. Agreed. So, yeah, perfect comparison. And it's in the database, which is where it belongs. So does Florian. Moving on. Sithis. We have 3 Sithis decks. Sithis is an interesting deck. I don't think it's... I think it belongs here because it plays well in the non-tournament meta. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense at your local LGS. It makes sense, in a lot of like smaller events, CDH side events at Command Fest. It's a perfect deck for that.
I think it really is one of those decks where newer players are drawn to it because so many people in casual have Enchantress decks, and when Sithis was previewed, she immediately became the go-to Enchantments commander. So if you have a Sithis deck and you want to start delving into CDH, it's a very easy deck to upgrade and get it there.
Yep, agreed. Moving on, but there's 3 lists, which is astounding to me, but okay, I get it. Tevesh Timna stacks.
It's a meme.
Yeah, I know a guy who played this deck. He played it like 3 or 4 times and then took it apart for good reason.
Yeah.
We got Krakashima.
Perfect main page deck.
Perfect
main page deck.
Malcolm Rograk. Interesting.
Is it trying to polymorph into Glinhorn? Is that the idea?
It is. Yes, it is.
That's cool. That's a Brewer's Corner deck, though.
Brewer's Corner deck, exactly. Very interesting. Good approach. Like, I want to hear more about it. Like, I want to maybe mess around with it, but I'm not going to pick it up and go to my LGS with it out of nowhere. I'm not going to go to a tournament with it. So Brewer's Corner deck, cool. Mizzix Storm. I have seen this deck do quite good things. It has
I played against
top
it
16.
last Chaos.
Yep, Aya was on it, right?
Oh, yes, not Aya was on it. No, it was Aya. Oh, not Aya. Alyssa. So I was against Alyssa round 1, and she put a nice comment in the Discord we share that said, "Fastest 0-1 of my life to Wounded Satellite."
Nice. I've played against that deck plenty of times. It's a real deck. It belongs here. Joyra Storm. Do people still play that deck? I mean,
no. And this is, I fucking despise Joyra. Oh, do I despise Joyra. It is the definition of a deck that will just take forever and Cheerio through the game. And it's probably pretty much the same as Bergie Storm in actuality and how it functions. But maybe worse, but better because it gets blue, but less consistent because counters are going to ruin your draws. I don't know. It's not a deck I've never seen in CDH.
Just curious, when was it last updated? Oh, it was updated 10 days ago. This person's working on this deck, so it's yeah. But again, I think it's fine to stay here, but it's not a deck I would ever bring to a tournament.
No.
Niv Mizzet.
Tell me, it's Shauna's list is on there, right?
I don't know. Let me see.
It better be Shauna's.
That's not Shauna's. Let's see the next one. That's not Shauna.
I swear to God, if this last one isn't Shauna.
Not Shauna.
What the fuck?
Yeah, yeah. So to me, that it's just so funny. Oh my god, yeah. If there's
Oh my
one Niv Mizzet deck that belongs here, it's Shauna's, and these other three, I don't even care. Like it's
Yeah,
Shauna's.
I don't give a shit. If it's not Shauna's list, it's not the best list. Like, why are you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Moving
is it
on.
Malcolm again?
Yeah,
Malcolm
but this one
Breaches.
is
I've
Malcolm
played against it
Breaches.
once. Played against it like literally once.
Okay. Malcolm
That's Malcolm
Kettis is a
Kettis.
deck.
Malcolm Kettis is real. Yeah, that's way.
Yes.
That should be the front one, not Malcolm Breaches.
Malcolm Breaches is not a deck I would put in on this page. I would put it on
I
Brewer's Corner at best.
I played against Big Gek Energy in my round 5 match that also had Freedom Waffle in it last Mox Masters, and
Yes.
it performed super well. It was awesome. It was ready to go for a win. Freedom Waffle was able to pull it out with the Sight Grip, but it was a really good deck.
I like that deck too because it has limited colors, and as we know, colors are our crutch. So
Yep.
it takes advantage of some cards you're just not used to seeing, and that packs a surprise that often takes down games where no one expected. So I happen to really like that deck, and I like what it does. So I definitely think
Yep.
it belongs here. Jessica Crom.
Q, I would assume Baron Dockside combo is the goal here.
Looks like it's ISO Rev. Yeah, Baron Master Wizard stuff. Sure,
Yeah,
sure,
sure.
okay,
Infinite mana, Jessica Outlet. Why not?
sure.
But
Yeah,
again, probably more of a Brewer's Corner deck.
yeah, yeah. I think so. I think it's interesting. I wouldn't pick it up and go to a tournament with it. I wouldn't.
Nope.
Yeah. Which brings us to Old Stick Fingers. All 4 of those decks.
We talked about him. Whatever he's supposed to do, be a linear graveyard strategy.
We have the Gitrog monster, which some will say it doesn't belong
Amazing.
here anymore. I think it does. I think that deck still plays.
It like top forward or should have top forward the last chaos.
Yeah, were it not for internet issues, James was the guy who's running it, would have absolutely, I think, made top 4.
Yeah.
Then we got Golgari Hulk.
4 lists. Wow.
Yeah. I've seen Grist.
Sure. Yeah.
A couple times.
Grist is cool.
Varol's okay. I've never seen Valros.
Valraz is, I mean, maybe the definition of an outdated deck would be Valraz. It is a sack outlet in the command zone, so it works really well for Hulk strategies, but yeah.
Doesn't seem that powerful right now, but okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Especially when isn't the best Hulk pile right now in Celestia colors, right?
No, Abzan.
I mean, yeah. But I mean you need white.
You need no, because if you're trying to do the Samwise thing, then you also need Viserys or something.
Right. Green, white, black. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I'm sorry. You don't need a Viserys here. You need the kitten, which is black. So you need Abzan to do it all.
Yes, but modern Hulk piles at this point, you don't want just green and black. You also want white.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, we got Cole. I respect Cole. I've heard.
I was about to say, I do need to put respect on Cole's name if you were going to shit on it. My buddy, who has now moved on to Dihada, used to be a main deck Cole player. Is it the best deck in the format? Absolutely not. But is it a very cool deck that can compete and should be in a competitive deck category? Yes.
Yeah, 100%. Winota stacks, I think, absolutely. Even though that deck's getting kicked around a lot right now, that's okay. It's still a competitive deck. Kinnan, we talked about this. Why don't you submit your deck on time, dude? So
yeah, we'll get there. I mean, the deadline was April 30th, and I got into CDH seriously on I think April 29th. So that was when I really started. Yeah, right. That was when I really started playing Kinnan. Was April, right at the end of April.
Nice. Well, we expect to see it next time, and if it's not in here next time, then I will absolutely blow a gasket.
I'll shred them alive.
Crocodema, or not Crocodema, Kodama Sakashima. Was that Sakadama? Sakadama. Yeah, that's a great deck.
Sakadama. It's a good deck.
It's a great stacks breaker. I've been meaning to build it just for that reason alone. Grolnok, there are 4 Grolnok lists.
Brewer's Corner deck. Never seen it. Does the thing one time. It's bad. It's not good.
Dude, 4 lists. 4 Grolnok lists.
Yeah.
4. How many Florian lists? 0. 4 Grolnok. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I got you. Yoshimaru and Thrasios. I've seen that deck put up a result once.
Yep.
It's cool. It's interesting. I think it belongs here. So does Florian.
Yeah. One thing I do want to say, actually, if we could back up to Kinnan for 2 seconds.
Sure.
Like, Kinnan is a 2-color deck that is showing 3 current lists, 1 more that's already on the outdated decks, and I think my list should be on here as well to make it 4. Kinnan is a 2-color deck that genuinely does have a variance in strategy and does have many different ways to go about it. You can go the turbo plan, you can go the stacks plan, and then you have something like me and Ping, which are both more in the middle, but he's more in the middle leaning proactive, I'm more in the middle leaning reactive and stacks. So there is a lot of variance in how you can build Kinnan.
100% agree. I think Kinnan is one of the most interesting decks in the format, and it's one of those decks where I think, a lot of times people run into problems where, like, I don't want to play what everyone else is playing, so I'm not going to play Timnacron because I don't want to be like everyone else. Kinnan is one of those decks where you can pick up a deck that's amazing, has proven itself, and put your own spin on it and play it completely differently than everyone else. Which is one of the reasons I think it's one of the best decks in the format. For that reason alone, you can really put your take on it. You don't have to feel like you're, a sheep. You could do something different, which is exactly what you did and what Ping did. So, yes. We've got Ishai Thrasios.
Never seen it. Not ever seen it a single time.
Last updated 5 months ago. The person who brewed this deck and put it on the database is not playing it anymore.
What can I actually? I'm just curious in some of the cards that are in this deck. Oh, it's still an Archon of Valor's Reach. Okay, cool. Good to know.
I don't know exactly what this deck does. I don't think I really.
It's a stacks deck. I mean, yeah, it's a stacks deck. You can tell that much.
Yeah, it runs Kinnan.
It's a good deck. Yeah.
Sure, and again, not shitting on this deck, but this deck is in the database. Florian is not. What? Why?
Main page of competitive decks in the database.
Yeah. We've got Derevi stacks. I don't see that deck anymore, but
no, it's back. It's back with a force because of the One Ring. Derevi is one of the best One Ring decks because
yes, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
We got Chilane mid range. I've always loved this deck. I don't see it a lot anymore, but I still love it. So I
played against it a couple times. Another deck including Kinnan.
Yeah, makes sense. Tivit, maybe the most I'd say top 5 deck in the format right now in terms of representation.
Top three.
Yeah, easily. Cool. We've got Marneus. I think this deck is cool. I think it's more of a Brewer's Corner deck. I haven't seen it really do much.
I've just seen it on spell table play, never in tournaments.
Yeah, I think it's got potential. I think it, as more interesting cards come out for it, I could see it sort of transcending. But right now, I'd call it more of a Brewer's Corner deck. We've got Rafine. I think this deck is good enough to warrant a spot.
It's good enough. It's one of the worst of the Esper competitive decks, but it is real enough to be a thing. And Zur Consultation might be the best outdated deck for really what it's trying to do.
I still see it. I saw it at the SCG Baltimore event. I saw several copies of Zur, and it did fine. So I think the deck is okay, and it's certainly good enough to warrant a spot here. I am curious about
Baltimore specifically. I'm a believer that a CDH tournament is not a real CDH tournament unless it is proxy friendly, and Baltimore was not. So I wonder if that has an effect on certain decks that were played in their existence within that meta because people couldn't play proxies. And Zur is a deck that people might have just had sleeved up in a real deck from before.
I could spend a whole episode talking about Baltimore. It was a very different kind of CDH event.
Animar won. That kind of says enough.
Yeah, I think it was. That tournament was crazy. That was a mess, but that's a topic for another time over some beers, I think. We got Malcolm Sakashima. I like this combination a lot, and I think it warrants.
So it's listed as Malcolm Sakashima, but then it also puts the Timna Malcolm decks in that category. Which Timna Malcolm is a real deck. Timna Sakashima I've never actually seen.
I built it. I tried it. It was fun. It didn't win.
Okay.
So it's a deck. It's out there in the meta. I think it's fine being represented here. So I'm good with that. Ishai Tevesh. That's an interesting deck. That okay. I've never seen it, but I've heard about it. I hear it's pretty solid. So cool. Inala obviously is one of those eternal decks that will always be there. One of the most consistently inconsistent decks you could play.
Cormella is the definition of a Brewer's Corner deck. It is a deck that can do a thing and is in development. Yep, I know a guy I know is actually in the process of getting it put together right now, but I'm yet to actually play against it.
Yeah, we have 2 of those and no Florians.
Yep.
Cool. We have Evelyn as another that has an interesting angle on the game. Yeah, the whole is the saw in half thing, right? Is that
No. It's a World Quarter deck because
Cormella's the saw in half one. Yeah.
Cormella does combos. Evelyn is nice because she inherently is an outlet for World Gorger Dragon, where as you're producing infinite mana, you flash in Evelyn, and then she becomes a part of the loop and exiles your opponent's libraries.
Okay. Very cool. Rockside. Does Rockside belong in the database?
Yes. Move on.
Armix Crom, definitely. I've seen Armix Crom quite a bit. It hasn't put up results lately, but I think it's a strong deck. Kess is another still outdated deck that's still good. Crux Silas, I saw this. This is an interesting new list that's coming around. I think it belongs to the Brewer's Corner.
I will say it gets to play a couple really nice cantrip cards that are black, that are a really cool thing for the strategy and fit super, super well with what it's trying to do. The deck I played against in a tournament was not on a lot of the ways to double Krug's trigger. It was missing Veyron. I think it had Harmonic Prodigy. It didn't have any clone effects, so it wasn't all in on multiplying Krug triggers. And he lost, I think, every single roll that game and pretty much couldn't resolve a spell.
Yikes.
Which, if you don't have a way to double the Krug triggers, is super likely.
Yeah. So I'm rather than us getting bogged down and going list by list, I'm just going to kind of move quicker through here and look for things that kind of stand out, like Arden Tana.
I've played against it, but it's a complete meme of a deck.
Yeah, we've got what is this? What? Jessica Thrasios? Okay, no, that deck's real. Halden Paco, that's real. We got the stacks piles here.
I think looking at the rest of the decks, which ones surprise you in their current existence? Is Khazar Ukima Food Chain maybe a deck that should be in the outdated section? Is Yidris a deck that should be in the outdated section?
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot here. Omnath.
Haven't seen Omnath in a while.
Haven't seen that in a long time. We've got all the Thrasher stimulus. Okay, we've got Cody. Is anyone playing Cody anymore?
No, it sniped a tournament and then never. It was updated 23 hours ago. So
all right, they're still working on it. They're working on it. Yeah, Najila. The best Najila deck is not here.
Well, you're on Najila stacks right now.
Tempo.
But yes, Najila Tempo. There is one specific deck that maybe deserves to be on the database above all others, and that would be Memo's Najila list, which is somehow not here.
Yeah, because it doesn't. It's missing 2 staples apparently. That's the reason it was rejected is because it doesn't have Imperial Seal and it doesn't have Neoform, and for those 2 reasons alone, it was rejected.
I completely trust Memo's intuition that if he does not run them, he has decided the deck is better without them, and given his performances with the deck, I think he's earned our trust in his opinions and card analysis of how the deck functions. You're in a 5-color pile, you need to do certain things, maybe those aren't the best things for the strategy. Yes. Give it a chance.
Well, Max, let me ask you this question. If you had to pick someone to decide what good CDH decks are, would you choose Squirrel Mob and Natix, or would you pick Memo?
I would pick Memo over them personally because Memo is an incredible CDH player with an incredible ideology, a perfect view of the format. He knows what he's up against. He knows what other decks are doing. He knows how they perform. He knows how good they are.
Yes, I agree 1,000%. If you want to
pick someone, he's called Memo the Coach.
Yes, he's incredible, and if he says it's good, it's good. If you're wrong, it's good. Period. But to my discussion earlier about Tim the Thrasios, right? Najila is probably top 2 deck in the format right now, most represented at tournaments over everything but Blue Farm, and there's only 3 lists of Najila in the database currently. 3.
But there's 4 old stick fingers.
There's 5 old stick fingers, and there's 7 Tim the Thrasios. So there should be,
Yeah.
in my mind, if anything, there should be 7 Agila decks. Another deck that could be built in numerous different ways, but there's only 3 represented. Completely
Yeah.
baffling to me. Then we've got these other ones. We've got all the different Kenrith approaches.
When was the last time you
Again,
saw first sliver food chain?
14 months ago. Yeah. And there's 2 of them. Now, when was the last update? I'm just curious. Oh, it's updated 2 days ago. Okay. All right. You got me.
Chain,
You got me. Yeah,
17 days ago. They're still
Okay,
working on
okay.
it. They're still working on it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You got me. Food chain. First.
But I wonder, a
deck.
lot of these decks might have just been updated because, Lord of the Rings came out. Now the One Ring and Orcish Bowmaster exists. They're probably good enough to go in most of these decks that can play them. So people just threw them into the list and updated it. Like if it's on the One Ring or Orcish Bowmaster. It's not on Bowmaster.
I don't see One Ring. I don't see it.
Okay, then I don't know what they did. Yeah. Go to history. What was the last card they changed out?
Let's take a look. Born Upon a Wind.
Okay, so a Lord of the Rings card. You know what I mean? Lotho, Born Upon a Wind, Orcish Bowmaster, the One Ring. A lot of these decks just got updated because a lot of very powerful cards just entered the format, and so I still don't think these decks are seeing that much play. I think they just got a quick update for obvious cards that should be included in the list.
Yeah, and neither list is running the One Ring right now.
Maybe you don't need it in a first sliver food chain turbo shell, but
I think you need the One Ring in every deck. Just my personal opinion.
Pretty much.
Okay, so I think we covered most of it. And again, like we're not doing this because we hate the database. We don't hate the database. The biggest problem I have with it is that it has a platform and it has an opportunity to really help welcome people into the format, help people understand what's out there, and do what it's supposed to do, which is describe purpose, which is to give a snapshot of the CDH meta and help people understand what's out there and what's playable. My problem is it doesn't do that in terms of what's represented, and it takes so long to update each time that we're basically seeing what the snapshot was, an incorrect snapshot of 3 months ago and not today. So I mean, what would you like to see them do differently?
I would like to see them be consistent in what their goal is and be more clear about it. Just because Nadix says on the CEDH Decklist Database Discord to you that the goal is an opinionated representation of diversity more so than competitiveness, that's not what is shown on the database on a list labeled competitive decks. I would recommend that they go a little bit away from personal opinion and steer more towards how it is actually viewed in the community, which is for a lot of players, especially newer players, they look at this and they expect this to be a representation of the meta. And so if that is what your primary audience is getting out of it, then you should lean towards that instead of being focused on your own personal goals.
I agree 1,000%. And my biggest worry is that you're going to have somebody who's moving from casual into CDH and wants to be a part of our community, wants to come compete, wants to play, and they go to the database, they pick up Grenzo, they take it to their local CDH event, and they just get ground and beaten and embarrassed, and they're like, this format sucks, this is not what I want to be doing with my life, and they move on, and we lose the potential growth in our community. So I think we covered it all.
If you're going to label something competitive decks, make them competitive.
Yeah, agreed. So I think we covered it. I think there's nothing else that needs to be said at this point. I'm sure there'll be some blowbacks and people may not like what we said here, but I stand by everything I said.
I'm fine with the drama.
Bring it on. If you like this though, if you enjoyed this conversation, do the whole with the like, subscribe thing. Leave us some comments. Tell us where we're wrong. Tell us where we're right. And that hopefully we can keep bringing you content like this and have some good discussions. Go into the under realm of CDH and talk about what's going on. So, thanks.